Okay, greetings, kids. The the phrase or word for the phrase or word for this particular week. Actually, probably with a longer footprint than that is free will. Now, what do you think of when you hear that term? You know, the thing that comes to my mind is a song. You know, and there's one phrase in the song, and that phrase goes, "Never was a horse like the Tennessee stud." And I think that encapsulates the essence of that term free will. Because, we often throw that around glibly in a conversations. But the reality of, having the will or the responsibility of being that willful. Oh, free willy, yeah, let's get that orca out of the cage within which is captured. That's a slightly different version than the free will that I'm thinking about. Probably more appropriately. Hang on a second. Now there's two versions of this free will that I'm going to just, toot little so you can kind of get a feel for it though. One version of free will, which is really more of a process of freedom of choice. Is it going to be that high-spirited flute that's, joyful at everything that it sets in motion? Or might there be something a little more might there be, what shall we rephrase it as? The complications of consequence. Yeah, there are consequences. Freedom of choice, yes. Free will, I'm not inclined to, give that as much merit as some people try to. Freedom of choice, yes, we always have a freedom of choice, but what are the options, in each of those choices that stand before us? And what might the results be? Consequences. There is responsibility for what it is that our choices initiate. There are always conditions. And are you willing to really accept the responsibility and actually deal with the consequences of what those choices that you make are? 4 days ago, the spring equinox transpired. That's the sun moving into Aries. There's a certain newness that Aries represents. That, from a actual chronological perspective, is more of the continuation of a cyclic unfoldment that is being brought around to that point where the seed that has been developed within the previous cycle has been, planted in the earth. Does that sound like a little springtime to you? we're at that time of year here in the northern hemisphere. Springtime right around the corner. Up here in Washington, not quite as evident as one might hope. Still very wet, a little cool. Although tomorrow we're supposed to get up into the 60s, but just for a day before it goes back into the rain again. This is my first post in probably 3 weeks because I'm done with my traveling. I was going to say vacation to the Southwest, but really it was much more of a working vacation than an actual, kick back and just relax and enjoy yourself. I mind you, the food was delightful. The temperatures were absolutely exquisite down there in La Jolla and Phoenix. But I did a lot of repair work on a couple of different places that were not quite as relaxing as a vacation version that, somehow my freedom of choice perhaps would have aimed for. But I have these capacities to be able to make and fix things, so that is what happened on my adventure. Let's take a look at the chart. This is a chart for this morning, Monday, the 24th of March. Since I haven't really been chatting regularly with you all, we're still in the that cycle of the eclipses that are, first we've had the lunar eclipse a week and some ago, and the next will be a solar eclipse that happens this Saturday, I believe. But we'll get to that. Right now, Venus is in retrograde. Retrograde. What does that mean? It means a turning around, a pulling back from, if you will, the energy of what Venus is inclined to, which is partnership, love, artistic expression, valuations on things. And when a planet goes retrograde, it says, well, I'm going to give you a chance to reflect upon how tuned in are you to what the essence of what my planet stands for. And we're talking Venus here. Venus it's that realm of how do we interact with one another. Well, Venus is in Aries right now, so the potential for reacting with one another, it could be a little impulsive because that's essence of Aries at work. But Venus is, you might see here, it's at 1 degree of Aries, so it's just about to go back into Pisces, where it spent the last little while. And that is a deeper and more profound pool of essence within which the, what shall we call it, the impulsivity of the everyday life is not quite as adamant. Also, recently, on the 14th of March, or the 15th, depending on where you are, Mercury decided, I'm going to follow Venus. And it went retrograde at about, I think it was about 9 degrees of of also Aries. You know, here's another pulling back, reflecting, and, if you will, challenges to uh, our realms of conversation, thinking, uh, market. Mercury does have an influence on the markets that, it would be good and wise to pay attention to on this particular day, Monday. While I'm talking to you, Mercury is at 4 degrees of Aries, as you can see here, and the Sun is at 4 degrees of Aries. This is referred to as Cassimi, basically being in the heart of the Sun. Now, what is the Sun? Sun is, there's a certain regality to what the Sun represents. It can be the kingliness or the queenliness of an experience. We're now talking about Aries, however. So the basic energy of the Sun in Aries, where it is exalted, by the way, is, perhaps an inflated perspective of what the duties and responsibilities, or maybe it's just the accolades of being in that kind of a position, represent. But today, Mercury, in its retrograde, is in the heart of that Sun. So there's opportunity, if you will, for being presented with permission to say what you want. And I've been really wrestling around with this experience of wants versus needs. Wants, what do I want, but what do I really need? And this, and my drum circle shamanic journeys of this last weekend, I went and queried of my guide as to, this quandary that I was going through on several different levels. One was, the want or the need of being a continued force in the presentation of the astrological dance. While at the same time, I was encouraged not to give it up, but what should we call it, the influences of the shamanist or shamanistic dance actually seeks more of a level of audience as I do this expression, these chatters of, being more of an invitation to the beings, the muses, if you will, that are, they wait for those opportunities to come through us in moments when we, make ourselves available to allow something new to transpire. A new form of music. Oh, there's a muse thought if I ever had one. But way more than that, what I was shown is I've been really wrestling as well with economics. And I was shown this term that was weeconomics. I went, weeconomics? What on earth is weeconomics? And as I wrote it down from my journey, I wrote capital W-E dash economics. And then I wrote right after it, a more shared resource resonance. And the word amor, which you could see might be two words, came out as one, which amor is love. Love, shared resource resonance, which, irony of ironies, I think is more of a resonance with what it is that love does represent. And a weakonomics is more of a shared process of, the resources of this planet amongst all of us. The economic or the capitalistic system that has essentially been hijacked by a cadre of folks no longer functions in a way that has the outcome that we might hope for the continuation of civilization on the planet. Too much has been sequestered away in too small a package. And what it is that the rest of us have to share just isn't enough. That was just, multiple versions of things that have cropped through my brain as I debated, Do I continue with these celestial chatters each week? Because there are factors afoot that, while the planetary dance that has been going on around us all our lives, and forever for that matter, if we're paying attention to it, which is what the astrology dance is for me, gives inclinations for energy signatures at work at any particular time. And oftentimes, in the process of human nature, we'll call it, there is this search for something to guide me, to guide us, and though this planetary interaction that astrology represents can represent that, it doesn't demand of you any particular action. And here's where we get back to that. Is it free will or is it freedom of choice? And am I willing to accept the responsibility for which direction I choose to go in? That's more of an essay question. Something that you have to answer. I can't answer that for you, And when I do astrological chart readings, I'm going to present you with options. I'm not going to tell you what it is you need to do. There are energies afoot that it is or would be wise to pay attention to. But each of us has that freedom of choice to decide, is this or is this not going to be of benefit to me? And what are the consequences going to be if I should take a step in that direction? Anyway, I'm utilizing that Mercury, Cassimi the Sun right now, to speak as clearly as I can during this Mercury retrograde cycle with the full backing of a solar impulse to really, shy away from, if you will, the war drums that I often hear beating in the background when Aries is at the helm. And that's where Aries is right now. And I don't know if you can feel it, But there is a substantial amount of discomfort. And it seems like it might be expanding on the surface of planet Earth with, certain factors vying for control and painting others who aren't in their particular pocket as enemies of the state or something along those lines. It's all a bunch of hooey. We all have responsibility to one another and to this planetary jewel that we live on for finding a source of resonance between us that actually is inclusive of every living essence that our souls incarnated to participate with in this current journey process that we are about. And this goes well beyond any planetary significances that are at work. I'm still going to use them, but be advised that there are other factors that are vying for my attention that say that, I may be able to paint a picture for you astrologically of what's transpiring right now, but I need to make my choices based on what it is that I'm willing to accept the consequences for. Whew, I haven't even got past Monday yet. Anyway, this week, let's just go on. This sandwiching of that 0 degrees Aries moment by Venus and Neptune changes on Thursday. Or is it Friday? Oh, wait a second. It happened while I was clicking. On this day, Wednesday, Venus moves back into Pisces and is holding hands with Neptune. Neptune in Pisces, a planet that it has a very strong affinity for, can bring into our retrograde Venus's quiver, if you will, arrows tipped with questions as to the effectiveness of how I partner with others that, because of the Neptunian signature in there, are not going to be easily portrayed with enormous amounts of clarity. Because Neptune, there's an illusion quality to what Neptune stands for, and essentially Pisces carries that same quality of, potential confusion until one recognizes that the necessity of that so-called confusion and illusion are required steps in the spiritual quest process that we as soul beings came to enhance and grow with as we do this planetary dance and discover one another in this same kind of energy. Can you feel that? I came to be that expression, as did you. But the potential confusion of the human nature that we were born into doesn't say, here's a golden platter, and on it are the opportunities for how you might grow your soul essence. Oh, no, not. It's more like, we haven't got time to show you this golden platter of opportunities that as a soul being you came to grow into. We want to show you the distractions of what it means to be in this theoretically 5-dimensional sense level of a being here in human form on planet Earth, and the amazing amount of distractions that this can provide for you. From what? From actually allowing your soul to grow. Venus conjunct Neptune. Partnership is being considered from a profound level here. If you're willing to recognize that those seemingly confusing and illusionary versions of where that can take you are but distractions from what it is that, as a true soul spiritual being, in your heart is calling for your attention. Let's go to Saturday. On Saturday, at 9 degrees of Aries, is a new moon. And because this is with only 12 degrees away from the North Node, it's a solar eclipse. I want to first read you a version of the Sabian symbol from Dan Ruger for kind of a divination process to pay attention to as this solar eclipse new moon sets in motion for the next cycle. It reads, a teacher gives new symbolic forms to traditional images. I think of the symbols of the chart. A Pluto up here still dancing quite closely with my natal moon here at the beginning of Aquarius, as that's a symbol. But Pluto represents a deep, churning kind of energy that is focused intently on transformation. And sitting on my moon, which at the beginning of this week, the moon and Pluto by transit were holding hands there together at the beginning of that Aquarius cycle. For me, I go, the moon. Yeah. The moon is the common folk. Aquarius is generally the 11th sign of this Thema Mundi type chart, and as such has to deal with groups. And my moon, right now being tickled with plutonic energy, wants to inspire, if you will, a transformative energy as to why is it that we come together. Not just at a basic social level, but at a meaningful and more focused and intense way of being able to tap within each other's sphere of influence to see where is it that this group energy is inviting us to, wake up to in a new fashion. That's the Aquarian side. Not a same old kind of a thing. And this 26-year dance that Pluto's going to be doing going through Aquarius is going to essentially enhance that intensity of allowing something to die and pass away so that something new can be born in that Aquarian arena. Why is it that we came together? That's another question for you to ponder upon. The keynote for this degree of the new moon and solar eclipse: revision of attitude at the beginning of a new cycle of experience. Are you willing? I know I am. To release old forms that said life needs to be in a certain way as a human being. And I'm sensing that there's more to the potential of being us that has just been awaiting us to awaken to that perspective. And yes, be demanding of those who ostensibly have assumed positions of authority or control, the sun, in our worlds, to say, we aren't going to take it anymore. There are things that are relevant way beyond just this economic dance that has ostensibly taken over the reason for being alive on planet Earth. There's a thing called the Saros cycle, which basically the eclipses, they begin at either 0 degrees or early Capricorn or 0 degrees or early Cancer in their retrograde dance through the zodiac that lasts for a very long cycle of eclipses. And each one of them began with an initial chart when their first eclipse transpired. The one we are in right now, which is the North, a new North Saros cycle. It's young. It began in 1664. And you say 1664 is young? Yeah, because if I go and look at the solar cycle 9 South, it began in the year 727. So you can kind of see 1664. This is a very relatively young solar cycle, Saros cycle. Something to be aware of from the energy of that initiation of this particular Saros cycle is an essence. This is from Bernadette Brady's book, Predictive Astrology, where she talks about these Saros cycles and the charts that were their initiation points. It says, this is a very physically expressive Saros series. accidents, great physical effort, violence, or any sudden physical events. Accidents can happen there. These can be experienced positively, as for example, the first time snow skiing, or it can be felt negatively in terms of accidents and so on. The approach to take when this series is affecting a chart is not to hide away, but to undertake some physical activity with an ever-watchful eye to safety. One thing about eclipses is they represent a very dynamic level of change. It's not like you can just kind of, I say you can, because remember, we're talking about the freedom of choice. You can just say, hey, it's an eclipse. But this eclipse, this is the last eclipse that'll be in the Aries cycle. They move back into the Pisces Virgo cycle after this. So if you're getting or sensing some angst about the drumbeats of war that are afoot here on planet Earth, this is the last initiation of that kind of a eclipse that's happening in Aries and Virgo for the next 19 years. A long cycle. We're going into the Pisces Virgo dance. It's time to fine-tune your spiritual side of your soul quest. But this will be the experience for the next few years as the nodes move backwards through the Pisces Virgo equation. Oh, there will be challenges. There always are. But remember, you still have a freedom of choice. You just have to be willing to accept the consequences. That's all I got for this week. Feel the newness of this Aries energy that we just entered. We're going to be tasked with challenges that we came at this particular time to embrace with our soul awareness. That is not here just to plod through our daily lives, but to be invigorated by the experience of being present as a soul being incarnate in this physical body, to make something meaningful that is why we come together. See you all next week. Hopefully I wasn't too intense for you. But these are trying times, and we have some magic to accomplish. Ciao.